What plant food can reduce appetite much like Ozempic? What can reduce blood sugar after a meal by 30%? What does your body do to safely store excess carbohydrates? Does the time of day affect the blood sugar response to the very same meal? How do we stop cravings? All these questions answered and many more if you stick around for this metabolic health summary. I've put together this list of profound gems of information because I listened to Dr. Casey Means, a medical doctor, when she was interviewed on the Huberman Lab podcast. It was a 3-hour interview and she shared so many interesting and useful insights into metabolic health, metabolic capacity and mitochondria that I knew I had to summarize it for myself and for anyone who cares to watch. So I'm going to list these 13 points in ascending order of importance, from simply very interesting right up to the most profoundly useful points. And also, before I get started, Dr. Casey refers repeatedly to mitochondria and their importance in human metabolism. Just in case you weren't aware, mitochondria are organelles, or tiny bean-shaped cellular suborgans situated in most cells of our bodies. Among other tasks, they are understood to produce more than 80% of cellular energy. So with that out of the way, let's get on with it. Point number 13. Dr. Means informs us that the human population is cooling, and the average body temperature has dropped by 2% over the last 200 years. I looked up the Stanford University study I think she was citing, and they say the drop was 1.6%. But hey, close enough. She's implying here that the body temperature drop is due to reduced energy production because we're less active. We should move more, use more ATP or energy, require more energy, and produce more mitochondria in order to make that happen, therefore improving metabolic health. Now, point number 12 was actually introduced by Dr. Huberman and expanded upon by Dr. Casey. They're saying that ultra-processing of food is the polypharmacy of food, breaking down food, that is, to constituent parts that were never meant to be separated from each other, then adding them to synthetic chemicals, creating something the body doesn't fully recognize, doesn't know how to appropriately metabolize, and also making it very difficult for us to regulate hunger correctly. Number 11 already. Dr. Casey talks about thylakoids, which are the site of the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis in plants. Thylakoids are little capsules within chloroplasts, which themselves have a similar role in plants to mitochondria in human cells. The thing is, eating lots of these from green plants has been shown to activate receptors in our gut and increase reception of the satiety hormone GLP-1. This is exactly what weight loss drugs like Ozempic do. She said eating 100 grams of spinach contains around 5 grams of thylakoids and can lead to a 2 or 3-fold increase in GLP-1 secretion. So leafy greens can help us lose weight. Who would have guessed? Number 10. And here Dr. Means may have been citing some research, but at any rate, I take her word for it. She said, if you take all the foods you're going to eat in a day and eat them within a 6-hour period, and then compare that to eating the very same sample of food over a 10-hour period, then with the 6-hour window, we end up with lower average blood glucose and insulin levels over the day. In other words, she says, when we time-restricted feed or compress our eating in a reasonable fashion, our metabolic health is better. In number 9, Dr. Casey suggests including more fibre helps reduce fluctuations in blood glucose levels, partly because fibre slows the digestive process and also blocks the absorption of simple carbohydrates to some degree. Blood glucose management is a huge problem these days, and including more fibre is one way of improving that. By the way, eating more fibre helps remove excess cholesterol from our bloodstream. See this short video if you'd like to know how that happens. Number 8. Dr. Means talks about one of the famous Kevin Hall studies where they locked people up at the NIH and fed them an unlimited supply of either ultra-processed foods or whole foods. Those in the processed foods group ate 7,000 more calories over 2 weeks than those in the unprocessed food group. I mean, put me in a room in front of a pile of cakes and a pile of broccoli, and I think I know what's going to happen. But seriously, the fact that this is now peer-reviewed research is quite sobering. Or how about number 7? What if you eat the exact same meal at 9:30 a.m. or at 8:30 p.m.? The nighttime meal has a far bigger glucose and insulin response than does the morning meal. Here she's saying this could be because we're typically more active in the morning, or it's something more fundamental to do with our circadian rhythm, or both. We might want to choose to eat more of our food earlier in the day to more easily manage blood sugar. For number 6, she's stating that triglycerides, which are a form of fat, are actually a storage form of excess carbohydrates transported in the blood. This might sound counterintuitive, but when our blood sugar is chronically high, our liver responds by turning a lot of the excess glucose into fat so that it can be transported to fat tissue where it can be stored relatively safely. This fat production is called de novo lipogenesis. Many of us who go low carb or keto for an extended period of time notice in our blood test results that our triglyceride levels go down. This may simply be because we are consuming far less refined carbohydrates, and our liver does not need to produce and expel so much fat. Okay, number 5 is technical but super important. Dr. Casey says we need to increase metabolic capacity, which means making more mitochondria, getting each mitochondrion to be more functional, and having each more functional mitochondrion processing more energy. This all runs parallel with promoting mitophagy with endurance and high-intensity activity, promoting mitochondrial biogenesis, increasing the oxidative capacity of each mitochondrion with sprint workouts, for example. We need to increase mitochondrial fusion, which means creating more long chains of mitochondria that are more efficient and build more mitochondria with resistance training, for example. Number 4 is all about walking. If walking were a pill, says Dr. Means, it would be the most impactful pill ever known to modern medicine. Whether studies observe people who walk 7,000 steps or 12,000 steps per day, those more active walkers generally experience 50% or higher reduced all-cause mortality at any given age. But ultimately, it's about the muscle contraction being its own kind of powerful medicine. Dr. Casey also makes very clear that breaking these large step numbers up into several chunks works very well to improve metabolic health. In fact, she says that being sedentary all day and exercising once a day is not ideal. We have evolved to be moving frequently, spread across the day. Obviously, we don't all have the luxury of being able to do this, but we should do what we can. And a short walk after a meal can reduce blood glucose by 30 to 35%. That's what you call low-hanging fruit. Number 3 is all about blood pressure. Dr. Casey points out that insulin is a key activator of nitric oxide, which dilates or expands blood vessels. So if we become insulin resistant, as well as not responding to insulin to get blood sugar into cells, our cells also don't respond by producing the nitric oxide like they should. This means a poor supply of energy to cells, but even more seriously, more blood vessel constriction and therefore higher blood pressure. High blood pressure is one of the most serious threats to long-term health, period. Number 2 is about reactive hypoglycemia and cravings. So when we spike our glucose with high carbohydrate, high starch foods, we'll often have a big crash afterwards because a glucose spike leads to a major insulin secretion, which will in turn reduce blood glucose often below the original baseline. Blood glucose is now too low, and this is reactive hypoglycemia. Dr. Casey says the extent of post-meal dips, the crash after the spike that is predictive of 24-hour energy intake and cravings for carbohydrates. Think of it as a signal to the body. We've crashed our blood sugar too low and we need to eat carbohydrates to get our blood sugar back to normal. Or we could just go low carb and that silly stuff would never happen. Just saying. Finally, number 1 brings us to the 5 aspects of nutrition we need to move us toward better metabolic health. And they are 1, fibre-containing foods like vegetables and fruit. 2, omega-3 containing foods like mackerel, sardines, seaweed, chia seeds and hemp seeds. 3, adequate healthy protein we can get from fish, eggs, meat and plant proteins like hemp seeds, beans and lentils and lupin. Lupin is crazy high in protein. 4, a good amount of probiotics which is available in kimchi, sauerkraut, home fermented vegetables and yogurt. And 5, high antioxidant sources such as extra dark chocolate, blueberries, kale, spices and herbs, and pecan nuts. I know this final point sounds like the same old health information we hear every day, but it's still the king. If we do it, we'll notice the difference. So there it is. The communicative metabolism genius of Dr. Casey Means in just a few minutes. I hope that helps. Well, I've got to go see a man about a dog, so thank you for watching. If you found this video useful or interesting, or even both, then please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.